Hello, and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Roshni. We're writers helping writers with whatever writing ailments you might have.
Whether it's related to your craft or your career, we can help.
Are you ready for your session?
The doctors are in.
You know, we just finished doing another episode, and something that we kept saying in it struck me. I don't know if you caught it either, but we kept calling art content.
Mm-hmm.
Did you catch that? Every time we talked about art, writing, music, whatever, it was always content.
Yeah, it's like everybody's a content creator now. That's the thing now.
Yeah, it's not art, it's content, and it makes me wonder, like, because content is accessible for everyone, right? Anyone can create content, right? Like Ratatouille, anyone can cook. But maybe should we go back to the days when it was just art and it was kind of there were steps before you could even get your art out there? I don't know. What do you think?
I think steps have been very helpful for me. In fact, one of the group that I'm involved with, Get It Made, has put together. It's evolved over the years I've been involved with them, but they really have fine-tuned their program now. They've got a flow chart and all this cool stuff to really. And it's not about limiting who has access or who can create content or whose scripts get made or sold. It's more about creating a pipeline to make sure that as you're creating your content, you're creating the best content you can create. So it's not about limiting, it's more about empowering through a process. So yes, you have to go through various stages. You have to do the work, but it's all about, at the end of the day, you'll have a viable product. In that respect, they're being gatekeepers. And I've seen some other programs out there as well. Some of the other sites that used to just like, go post your script here. We give you access to industry people, have been developing these kinds of programs to, pipeline scripts to the end by putting in tools and resources and people to help writers create the content that will get made.
I see that. I mean, you could argue that there's still a barrier to entry, as in you still have to put in your time, and I believe you pay dues to this program, right?
Yeah, there's a little bit of money
so there's
involved.
Still like barriers to entry, but like, I don't know, I was thinking about, like, we don't really have, I mean, you see these things about like the death of the celebrity and the death of the movie star and blah blah blah. Social media has killed that, yada yada. But I mean, there are very few big acts, like Taylor Swift, for example. And you have to think, like, or, in the movie star realm, I can think of a few names that I know as up and comers, but like, I don't really know who's around. And I have to wonder if part of that is because it's just so easy. Like, you get, like, no, let me try to.
Sure.
You can be a big fish in a bazillion small ponds, and yet nobody's really heard of you.
That's a great analogy.
You know what I mean? Like, you can be a big, for example, D&D player, and that's a very niche category. And the people who follow you really know you, but like, it's not like the entertainment world at large necessarily knows you. And that's fine. Like, it's great that you found your niche. But I mean, I remember back when I was doing music, and I'm sure it's still kind of like this. I don't know. I'm not in that world anymore. But if you were an indie artist and you could get on KCRW here in LA, it was like you made it. They were a tastemaker station. You know what I mean? To even get on the radio was a big deal. And you would, as the average person, you'd listen to the radio and be like, oh, I like this song, and you'd try to find out who the artist is, and you'd like go buy the album and all this stuff. And now it's like, well, you hear like these random Spotify playlists and then you don't know who the artist is, and like maybe only like 2 people hear it. Do you know what I mean? It's just like there's so much stuff, and we've complained about this with streaming. There's so much stuff, but it doesn't make anything rise to the top. It's hard to break through all of that and really rise to the top. It makes me think of, like, if you've ever seen The Holiday. Have you seen The Holiday?
Oh, we've talked about this before, yeah.
Yeah. So that scene where Kate Winslet is in LA and she meets Arthur, who's like a former writer in the golden age of Hollywood, and he's reading the paper and he's complaining about how there's 9 movies opening in one weekend. And he's like, back in my day, it was, 1 or 2 movies. Now it's 9, and you really have to do well in the first weekend to make a
Hmm.
impact. You have to make a killing, otherwise it's never going to work. And she's like, "Are you always this feisty?" And then the conversation turns. The Holiday was done in, like, I think 2004. So even in as early as 2004, this, person in this movie was recognizing that there's too much content out
Hmm.
there that you have to.
Dilution.
Yeah. And that's what agents and managers and record labels were for. And now you kind of don't need them if you can like we're sort of encouraged to circumvent them, but they were there for a reason.
Hmm. No, you've dilution is exactly it's a problem. If you're looking from the top down, it's a problem because big companies make money by selling big ticket items, big films, big albums, big shows, because
Mhm.
they make their money off of those things, like getting 20 million people to watch a show, or making 150 million at the box office in one weekend. That's how they make their money. But if you're a content creator making stupid videos on YouTube, what's your whatever, what's the word, your um, gauge of success is much different from the bottom up. You want to build viewers, you want to get ad revenue, you want to pay your rent,
Mhm.
so it's a much different calculation. So if a million people are doing that and they're making a living and they're paying their rent and nobody knows who they are except for the people who follow them, it's great for them. But it as an industry, it's not great because it's taking eyes away from TV, film, radio, and Spotify or whatever, those kinds of things.
Mhm. Well, I mean, and that's a really good example too. I think back in the day, like YouTube even and all those like, Vine and whatever where people would create stuff, the industry, entertainment now as a whole, and that includes music, art, comedy, acting, and content creation, it was always a long haul, right?
Hmm.
They think when I first came here, they said the average time it took to break in as a stand-up comic is 10 years. For a band, it's 5 years. A lot of actors would throw in the towel after 2 if they hadn't hit it big. I started noticing in my own career, I've been out here over 10 years, I started noticing a pickup around year 10. Partly because I'd been here so long that I think the CDs were like, "She ain't going anywhere, let's call her in." But I also had, like, honed my craft, and I knew what I was doing, and I knew how to, like, play the game. It is a long haul. But I think a lot of times, because of that crazy success people get on, like, TikTok and stuff, people are like, "If I don't hit within a year, why did I even try this content creation thing?" But it is a long haul game. It's always been a long haul game, except now you don't have people to guide you. And that is a very important distinction. For example, Sarah McLachlan, uh, she, I think, had a 9-album deal. Don't quote me on this because I didn't quite look it up. But she had a big record, like, amount of records deal with her label in Canada, which is kind of unheard of. They actually encourage, if you sign a deal with a record label, they encourage you to keep it as small as possible. Like, I'll do 1 or 2 records with you. You don't
Mm,
want to be in for like 9 albums. But they did that because they had to develop her. And I think it was her big hit, Fumbling Towards Ecstasy was the name of the album. Possession was the song when that came out in the 90s. That was like album number 4 or 5.
yeah.
And I remembered going back and, like, listening to her other catalog. It was okay. I liked the album that came out on the radio. The other ones, I'm like, yeah, I can see her development as an artist because that's what they did with you back then. They developed you as an artist. Now a record label's like, "Oh, are you selling tens, 20,000 copies? Are you making X amount of money? Cool, we can sign you and help you get bigger, but we're not gonna help you get to that point on your own." That's very rare. And I mean, it's kind of even the old studio system, right? Like, that's gone too. Everyone's a freelancer, but they would develop you as a writer. They develop you as an actor. And even with actors and agents, this is a really good example. Prior to me coming here, I came to LA in 2010. That was around the end of the generals. Do you know what a general is?
No.
Okay. So generals, this is why you wanted an agent. And I'm sure this was like this for writers. It definitely was like this for actors. You would get an agent. They would send you out to all the studios that they had connections with. They're called generals, aka general meetings. You meet with Sally, casting director. You don't even have to perform. You're not even like doing a monologue. You're just, talking, chit chatting,
Just
vibing,
meeting people.
whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's what you would do. And then they'd go back and remember, oh, yeah, I remember, WZT talent agency sent, so and so. I like that person. I'll call them in now when I have an audition. That was a general meeting. I have never taken a general because when I got here, generals were dying out. It was like a unheard of thing. The rise of the casting director workshop was happening when I got out here. And when you started talking to agents, it wasn't me going, "Oh, who do you know that you can get me a general with?" It was them asking me, "What CD workshops have you taken?" Guess what? Those CD workshops were money out of my pocket to
Mm-hmm.
go meet them for classes. That was money I was putting in, not time that my agent was investing in me. I don't know
Mm.
if anybody does generals anymore.
What would be the comparable thing for writers, though? We don't have generals. I guess
I I
some
mean,
writers
I would
do have
assume they would
generals,
do the
but
same thing, right? Like, maybe
yeah,
they would
for
send you
TV
to
specifically,
producers or
yeah,
directors or studios that they think you might be a good fit for a TV show. Yeah, showrunners, that's probably it. I don't know, I've never had a
yeah.
writing agent, but, like, that would be my guess, you know?
Hmm. That's interesting because I feel like the new age general is kind of like what you do yourself as far as self promotion, social media. Not as a social media content creator, but like you as a person, as an actor, or as a writer, as a as a persona, have to like, as one of the first lawyers I had in LA told me, you have to kind of create your own legend, your own urban
Mhm,
legend of yourself to get those calls and those meetings. Like,
mhm,
it's kind of walk the walk, talk the talk before you can walk the walk, so to speak.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, but you have to wonder, and we still have agents and managers and stuff like that, and I think they still serve a vital purpose. But it is interesting how much has changed. And before, the other thing too was an agent or a manager basically vetted the talent for those casting directors. They were saying, "Hey, I vouch that so and so is a good actor," right? I vouch that so and
Hmm.
so is a good musician. That's what A&R is in a record label, artist and repertoire. I don't even know what an artist and repertoire person would do now. Do they just go on YouTube and like look at playlists? Like the whole point was they'd go out to like the clubs and see the people's reactions and listen to the music, but they were the tastemakers. They were the front line. You trusted their judgment.
Hmm. Yeah, these days the writers, like general or whatever, or the gatekeeper in that is going to be things like Stage 32 and contests and things where you have to pay to play, where
Mhm.
you're hoping you get your script in there or the blacklist and you get a good rating or good review so that the industry people on those platforms will see you, or the contest will spam out your stuff to all the agents and managers. Or on Stage 32 you can literally buy a meeting with a, they say industry professional, but a lot of times they're assistant, readers and stuff like that. They're not actual, decision makers. So, but the idea is, the gatekeeping has shifted, like you said, with the casting directors. It's not about you showing your talent and being recognized for it. It's about you paying to get access to those people,
Yeah.
hoping that
Yeah.
they'll recognize your talent. And for
Yeah.
them, it becomes less important about whether or not, you are good or not, because they're making money off of you from the beginning. So that's why I don't like those kind of pay to play kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, and you even have to think, because I know, for example, a prevailing piece of advice, I think for writers, actors, whatever, is, well, if you don't see yourself in the film, write it, create it, film it. That's still a
Mm-hmm.
barrier to entry. You still have to pay for the short or pay for the film, hire people. If you want to put it in festivals, that's money. traveling around with it, like,
Mhm.
there's still there was always a barrier to entry, but I think the onus is more now on the talent, meaning the writer or
Mhm.
the actor, than there was on the agent or manager who was supposed to get you through that door.
Yeah, it was always like, do you have a podcast? Do you have a short film? Do you have
Mhm.
a million followers on Twitter or whatever it is?
Yeah.
Do you have a bankable asset that we can then, go with? And a lot of that goes back to the bean counters. It's like, well, if they've already got an audience, then we have to do less work. We don't have to promote them as much because they've already lined it up for us.
Yeah. I remember back in my touring days, what was his name? He was a Christian artist. Warren Barfield, actually. We did a show together. I don't know if he's still active. I haven't really followed, his music in a while. Warren, if you're out there, thank you for this conversation, and you're a great guy. But I remember we chatted because he was on, I think, did he just sign? It's been a while, honestly. This conversation was like 15 years ago. I think he had signed on his, like, 3rd album or something and was getting more recognition, like, in the Christian music world, and I remember he said it was a really hard decision to know whether or not to sign because up to that point, he was actually quite successful without being on a label, and when you're not on a label, you take more of that cut home. So he was like, when I was approached, I had to be like, "Is this a good idea? Because I'm already doing so well without it." And then he
Mm,
ultimately ended up signing because it could take him to places, further that he thought he could do where he was at. So, it's a hard thing. Like, yeah, like, if you're making that much, why would you wanna give away the percentage?
mhm.
I don't know.
A lot of the things I see with the writers now is, everyone used to be like, "Oh, you have to get an agent or a manager." Well, now I haven't heard anyone say that in a long time, actually. It's all about, just making content and getting your name out there,
Mhm.
and it works for some people. It definitely we've had many people on this podcast who have, through networking, gotten films made without, representation, so.
It's a tough model for them. I mean, if you
Mhm.
think about it, so a legit agent or manager, it varies. A manager is entitled to more of the pie, I think, than an agent is, but they don't get paid unless you get paid. And in theory, they really shouldn't even be taking a cut unless they got you that job. And
Mhm.
so, I mean, there's, protocols and, thoughts behind what you should cut them in and not cut them in on, but the model is such that they don't get anything unless you're getting paid. And when you look at a roster, they're probably only really earning off of, like, the top 5, if that. So, like,
Mhm.
it's a hard model. It's a really tough model, and, like, I think back in the day when they were more gatekeeper-y, when they were the tastemakers, then, yeah, they stood to make a lot more because there's less people that they're funneling through to these offices, right? There's less
Mhm.
people in general because they're the ones who get to say, "You get in or you don't." I'm not about now let me preface this by saying, when it comes to gatekeeping in terms of, like, we don't wanna see this representation, we don't wanna see this story from, these people of color or this disability or this sexual orientation, I am not about that. I believe we need that diversity, okay? I'm glad that that door has been opened. But I think there needs to be a little bit uh of a control on the talent as far as, like, we're not just gonna throw everything against the wall and hope it sticks. We do need and you
Mhm.
still see the cream rise to the crop. Like, you still see the talented ones rise to the top, like, but it's a lot harder, and it's a lot more onus on us.
Yeah, as much as I complain about things like the blacklist and Stage 32, there are some, benefits to that. I mean, I actually have done evaluations on the blacklist, and one of my films that scored mediocre years ago when I submitted it, that I've rewritten over and over again and polished and resent, did very well this last time. So
Oh, good.
so it shows progress. It's like, okay, there's learning about yourself as a writer. Like, okay, you don't know what you don't know, kind of thing. Everyone thinks that their script is wonderful, and until you show it to somebody else. So those kind of gatekeeping systems are helpful. If the fact that they cost money is the downside, but getting that feedback, that unadulterated feedback, is one of the only ways to learn. So sometimes there is justification for that expense, if it helps you, like you said, the long haul. I mean, some of these scripts I've worked on for 10 years, not continually, mind you, but
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I wrote some scripts, when I was early in my writing career, and I learned over the years, and I went back and revisited them, and in a lot of ways I looked at it and go, who wrote this crap? I'm like, oh, that was me. And then I rewrote them, and saw the problems in it, and now they're viable scripts. From that perspective, yeah, those kinds of gatekeepers and systems in place do help. They're not just about keeping you out, but helping you improve. So,
Yes.
hmm
Yeah,
and
which
that's
is
what
the same
managers are
thing.
supposed to do as well, right?
Yep, I was going to say, because you could have ideally, I mean, you're supposed to get a manager first and then an agent. I kind of went backwards, and I've pretty much always had an agent. I had a manager at one point. I haven't had a manager since. But the manager's supposed to develop you, right? Like that they're
hmm
supposed to be like, I see something in there. Maybe it's a little raw, but we'll polish it up and we'll get you going where you're competitive, that kind of thing. It,
Like
I
a
mean,
writing
it's
a, man,
just
a writing manager is supposed to like help you, like, what should you write and how should you write it, and so that we can go sell it. Versus an agent, which is about just making the deal.
yeah, but I feel like, I mean, at least on the acting side, I feel like agents kind of suffice as managers. So if you have an agent, you don't really need a manager. Like at least on the acting side, I don't know what it would be like for a writer. Um it's not just, it's what classes should you take? What's your brand? Oh, what clothes should you wear? How should you present yourself? It's like that. It's like an overall
Yeah,
package kind of thing. Whereas like if you have it on lock, like I know what my brand is, so like I don't really need that. It's just kind of, it's one of those things. It's really good for developmental, and you can also hire other people, not necessarily a manager, to help you with that stuff too. You know what I mean? You don't have to use a manager. You can, there's branding people, and there's, even just asking your peers, like, what do you see me as? Oh, okay, I guess I'm not this, I'm this, like that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's a, I wonder how agents and managers will evolve. And we've had situations where they have evolved into producers, which is kind of a no-no. Remember that a couple years ago, one of the agencies was like slap on the wrist because they had delved into producing, so it was like double
hmm
dipping. Do you remember that?
yep.
So like, but the way the model is right now, it probably would have worked before. It's probably got to change in the future. And even you mentioned like Stage 32 and Blacklist. I haven't been on those sites in a long time. I don't even know, are they still, like, viable and popular? I haven't heard anything. This is just me wondering, like, is it still like, "Oh my god, it was a Blacklist script," or has that kind of died down a little bit?
It's still, the blacklist just came out. It's still a thing. People still pay
Okay.
attention to it. Stage 32. I don't know what their success rate is. I know that they do a lot of uh, opportunities to pitch to various
Mhm.
executives, is all I know, and whether those are successful or not, I don't know. I've done pitch fests before, where you kind of speed date around the room
Mhm.
with the various assistants to agents and stuff like that, and some agents, and had it was an interesting experience, and I learned some stuff, but I didn't like make any progress with it. So I
Mhm.
don't know how valuable those are. The one interesting thing you were talking about the managers and not being able to make the deals and stuff. It's actually during the Writers Guild strike, a lot of agents kind of bailed to become managers, and I actually just read another article recently about more agents doing that. I think that they felt that they didn't have the opportunity to develop the talent like they wanted to, working at the big agencies, because the agencies were all about the deals and the money and stuff.
Well, okay, but here's the thing, I mean, and this might be a bit cynical, I don't know. Managers can take a bigger cut than an
hmm
agent can. So there's that. And the only thing is, a manager is technically not allowed to pitch you for a project like an agent can.
Mm-hmm.
But managers take a percentage of all of your earnings, whereas an agent is only taking a percentage of what they booked you for, theoretically, and
Mm-hmm.
also that division. So, like, your commercial agent is not touching your theatrical. Do you know
Right.
what I mean? But your
Mm-hmm.
manager is touching, like, everything that you're doing. Um, and also, I would argue that maybe because there's not really SAG franchised managers, that might be why they got out of it, so there's
Mm-hmm.
less restriction. That would be my thought. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm not them.
It's interesting to see how it's going to evolve because, with the economy and stuff and the COVID, pandemic ending, there's and the streamers, trying to shave their losses from, all the money they're spending on production.
Mhm.
The gatekeepers at, Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and the major, the regular studios are all going to be supposedly cutting back on their budgets. So the gatekeeping is going to become more stringent. A lot of times and especially I've seen this on TV and on streaming, especially lately, is there's a lot of movie actors going to streaming more and more. I think in the last month or so, I've watched a couple shows. There's Sylvester Stallone has Tulsa King, Billy Bob Thornton's on Landman. So there's these big actors all doing television now. So um,
I don't think that's coincidental, though. I don't know if you read the credits. Do you read credits?
not very often. No,
Okay. So, little bit of,
they're producing stuff too.
industry, like, whatever, lore or something. Remember before, it was kind of like you had your TV actors and you had your film actors, and you were
Hmm.
kind of on that track, and never the two shall meet. And then film actors started realizing they could make money in TV, why not? And it was steady, so they would go over there, so that was less of a pie. However, if you have been around like I have, TV directors and movie directors, casting directors, let me put that in there. TV casting directors and movie casting directors are not always the same offices. Okay?
Hmm.
So usually you get, I don't want to say pigeonholed, but like you get known for, like, you're really good at this, right? So the TV casting directors are usually in that world, and the film ones are usually in that world. And you can tell it's a style. If you ever look at the credits on streamers, and this is something I noticed early on in streaming, it's film casting directors.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah. Again, that's a gatekeeping system that's, looking at the dollar signs and the people writing those are also sometimes, big names from the film world too.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. So what do you think? Gatekeepers, yay, nay? What do you want to see in the industry in terms of accessibility and nurturing talent? Let us know in the comments. You can find us online at WG Therapy on Instagram, X, Blue Sky, YouTube, Writers Group Therapy Online. Am I missing anything?
no, I think you covered it.
All right. Let's start 2025 great. And remember where we're at. Thanks so much, you guys. We'll see you in a few weeks.